Now another classic example from Kasparov's practice in the Petrosian variation of the Queen's Indian, here with Kasparov using the d4 and e5 pawn structure to create some pressure on the black king side. So Elvis selects the Queen's Indian defense. Kasparov uses his patent with a3. Takes, and now Queen c2. Elvis took immediately on c3 and bishop e7. And now pawn to e3. To be honest, the move orders of these variations, I always had a tough time understanding. And to my uneducated eyes, e4 just looks like it gains a tempo immediately. But I guess we shouldn't be questioning Gary's play in these structures. In any event, we soon get the structure under consideration. So it takes a bit of shadow boxing to get there. Now Kasparov pushes with e4, and Elvis is reluctant to take on d4. That this is well, we're not going to consider this structure in depth. This is a common feature that, especially when White has his bishop on b2, Black prefers to keep these pawns on c5 and c3 to block that bishop. But in any event, after bishop f6, which is quite provocative to try to get White to play e5, Kasparov now plays e5 and brings his knight back to d2. So this typical regrouping, the queen is free to attack on the king side when maybe the rook will come over as well. And in the meantime, the knight can come to e4 to create more pressure on the black king side. So now after c takes d4, c takes d4, we get into the structure we're thinking about. And it's an interesting version of it because Black can use the d5 square for his bishop, but not for his knight. His knight would maybe be the better placed piece there. And in the meantime, the white pieces can move over to the black king side very quickly. In particular, actually, with this king on h8, it's not entirely clear why Black would want his king there. So Elvis played bishop d5, knight e4, and now rather than waiting for very natural moves of, say, queen to h5 and knight to g5, Elvis decided to try to seize the initiative on the king side by playing f5 himself. It's a very interesting concept, but it's not immediately clear that this is favourable for Black. Kasparov took en passant, of course, because you had were Black able to keep this pawn on f5, then he'd have very good play on the long white square diagonal from h1 to a8. White wouldn't have any significant kingside space advantage anymore. So Kasparov took, Black took with the bishop, and now knight takes, rook takes, and Elvis' idea is very aggressive to get play on the f file against the f2 pawn. His bishop is very well placed, taking aim at the king side as well, and perhaps his queen can join, say, after White plays f3, the queen could come to h5. But Kasparov diffuses all of these ideas seemingly without too much trouble. So he starts with bishop c1, just taking control of a couple of key dark squares on the king side. Rook a f8 and now f3, just getting the pawn out of the way. And now after knight c6, bishop e4. So that this is a very economical defensive construction from Kasparov. At the same time as exchanging Black's best piece on d5, he's re-establishing a central pawn majority, and so giving himself chances to get a past d pawn again. Elvis took on e4. Clearly, if Kasparov were compelled to take on d5, then from a structural perspective, Black really couldn't have any complaints about that at all. But I think the problem from Elvis' perspective is that Kasparov is just going to leave this bishop on e4. His next move is probably going to be bishop g5. and these rooks are going to start struggling for space. With moves like Queen c2, there's no way that you can leave that bishop on e4 forever, so Elvis just exchanges now. And now plays with e5 to try to get his knight into the centre of the board. Ideas like rook f2 are rarely going to be particularly problematic for white. In particular, it's going to be quite attractive for him simply to give up his queen for 2 rooks and then push his pawn in the middle of the board. So e5 is very logical. d5 creating a passed pawn, and now knight d4. So this knight looks very well placed, but the problem is that it's ultimately vulnerable to bishop b2 attacking the knight, and the knight doesn't really have any good retreat squares, in particular because the pawn on e5 will hang. So Elvis, after the queen moves away, is effectively compelled to go in for a tactical operation with knight to f3. It's pretty unclear what else to suggest here for black, but this doesn't seem to be adequate. After rook e3, Elvis played queen to g6 check. If instead he played rook to f2, then presumably white could just take on e5. And the bishop can come back to g3 to defend the king, and then these 2 pawns are going to run. So queen g6 check was maybe the last try, but now the mate threat is quite easily dealt with rook g1. And after queen h6, Elvis didn't bother waiting for bishop takes e5, which would seem to be winning on the spot, so he resigned. So an interesting example, I think, of black trying to re-establish the balance on the king side after white puts his pawn on e5 by playing f5. But Kasparov just played positionally perfect chess, rerouting his bishop to the c1 h6 diagonal, playing f3 and bishop e4 to take care of the bishop on d5, and just gaining a positionally winning structure where Elvis's tactical sacrificial methods on the king side proved to be clearly insufficient.